Pete Moore on Halo Talks NYC. I have the pleasure of bringing from the northern border of Canada, Ania. We are going to talk about Rooted. We're going to talk about dealing with panic attacks. We're going to talk about helping people through technology. That is a trend, and she has executed on that effectively. So Ania, welcome to Halo Talks.
Thanks for having me.
So, maybe talk a little bit about, what the frustration that was solved that either you experienced or others around you experienced that decided on your end to basically devote this into a full-time career and to start a company and not just a self-help component to helping others on the side.
Yeah, definitely. So I was in my fourth year of university when I experienced a panic attack. And up until then, I thought that panic attacks just meant that people were too stressed out. I couldn't relate. I was a pretty relaxed person. And then I went to the ER room, and the doctor there, understandably now looking back, but just didn't have enough time to sit down and explain everything to me. So I was just basically told, "You're fine, go home." And that set off this spiral of fear, which is extremely common with panic attacks. If you don't understand what's happening when it first occurs to you, especially, it can get really, really challenging. So that spiral of fear set me down, just a lot of negative changes in my life, a lot of debilitating changes. So that's where that frustration really came in. And it wasn't until I started learning the tools to effectively heal and manage panic attacks that I decided that an app needed to exist, because I have my phone on me at all times. Why not have this helpful solution right there?
Yeah. So could you just talk, it's kind of like a preamble here to the rest of the discussion on what is going on chemically in your body when you actually have a panic attack?
Well, it's a little different for everybody, but essentially your nervous system is activated, and there can be a number of different physical effects from increased sweating, blurred vision, heart palpitations, dry mouth, seeing stars. Those are all the physical effects. And then there's the mental effects that have to do with really negative thoughts, thinking that something really bad is happening, everything in your body is telling you that something's happening. Many people get the sensation that they're dying, and that's why 1% of ER visits are from panic attacks.
Gotcha.
It's actually a lot.
And as you thought about going through an app, given that people have different effects and different severities, how did you go about building the app in order to kind of take you through the sequencing that either the majority of the people have, or it kind of takes you through, the life cycle of the panic attack? And is this used now as kind of not dial 911, go to the app, or explain to us how the usage is?
Yeah. So when I was first creating it, it was definitely modeled off of what I needed, right? Because I wanted to create something that I knew very well. And that's why even today, when people come to me, they say, "Hey, why don't you make this for depression or for ADHD?" I say, I really want to focus on what I know well, and I want to execute on that very well. So that was sort of the premise for building Rooted and the different tools within the app. And then, to answer the latter question, it is used for immediate relief. So if you are in the moment experiencing a panic attack, you can pull out the app. It's based on cognitive behavioral therapy, and you're able to walk through whatever you're experiencing. There's two different options. You can either face the panic attack head on, which is very healing, or you can use these prompts to sort of keep it at bay, activating that parasympathetic nervous system. That's the one that calms us and gets us back to feeling stable again.
Got it. And is there any kind of, well, first talk about the name of the app. So Rooted, what was the genesis of that?
Yeah, so with Rooted, the idea is being grounded in the ground like a tree. You have big roots. When there's a big storm and you look at a big oak tree, it's not toppling over, right? It's handling that storm. So the idea is for everybody to get as rooted as possible, to build those roots themselves, and they don't feel like they need to call for help or topple over when those horrible feelings come.
So from a total, if we were looking at this from like a venture capital standpoint, they'd say, okay, Anya, what's the total addressable market? How many people get panic attacks annually in North America?
Yeah, so about 4% of adults get panic attacks.
Wow.
And that, yeah, exactly. Like, depending on how you look at it, it's a huge number, right? On the other hand, there's also anxiety disorder. And so over the years, because I was also experiencing anxiety, we put in a number of different tools that also address anxiety in general. So there's sleep support, there's visualization, there's journaling to help those sessions with the therapist be more effective because you can go back and really easily realize, okay, what was I doing before the panic attack or sensation of anxiety occurred? And so there's these other tools in addition to the lessons and the panic attack tool that really help with anxiety. And the number of folks with anxiety is just staggering now. It's 1 out of every 4 adults in North America will experience some.
Gotcha. So you have 2 million users. Talk about how that evolved over time, and are you specifically targeting? Talk about like your market penetration strategy. How do people find out about Rooted? And is it also, as an add-on question there, are you aligning with doctors and people in the profession, or or they view it as like a disintermediation of their services?
Yeah, so we're actually at 3 million users. I think
Oh wow,
we've been trying to book this podcast for a while. So we actually had a million more users and growth there. And primarily organically. And what that means is like we don't do advertising really, right? We have like the bare minimum. A lot of it is word of mouth, people sharing it with their friends and family after using it, with their community. You mentioned doctors and relationship with doctors. Doctors are a huge referral source for Rooted, therapists as well, clinicians. And the like app store optimization is something that I really focused on. So making sure that if people are searching for something like Rooted pops up. There's a number of things that go into that from, user reviews and user ratings is huge. So we have a 4.8 out of 5-star rating, and we have over 50,000 reviews from people now. Wow. So that is like super huge and being credible in, getting to that, to that search spot that we want to be at. And that's where most of the growth comes from.
When you started the business, what kind of, did you do any outside research or say, look, some of the best companies are built off of personal frustration or personal experiences like you articulated at the beginning here. Was there a need for you to basically like validate that, hey, I could get to 3 million users one day? Or are you, equally, kind of excited about how this has grown organically without actually having to spend, $20 million in marketing?
Yeah. So, I had no idea what would happen when I first launched Rooted. I had no idea. I just knew that I wanted to get it out there. I don't have an MBA, I don't have a background in business. So for me, the frustration and learning that, some of the best products are created out of frustration, it wouldn't have mattered to me at the time. Cause it was just like, I had like horse blinders on with what I was experiencing and what I was doing. And I didn't do like, competitive analysis or any of that, to be honest. Right. So getting to 1 million users was such a huge, huge, bewildering number. It was just like, wow, I can't believe that happened. So the rest sometimes feels like a dream, looking back, I would never wish panic attacks on anyone. And I would wish that I hadn't experienced them, even though I'm so happy that now Rooted is there for so many people, and the user reviews are a testament to that for sure. But, it was a horrible time. So I, like when I was experiencing it myself. So, I wouldn't, wish that on myself or anyone.
Gotcha. When you think about separate the people that you're helping and the usage and the fact that people feel like they have a support mechanism basically, on their phone, how do you think about from an entrepreneur building a business and saying, well, what is this app worth to someone? I mean, it's worth thousands of dollars per potential episode, right? You probably couldn't even quantify like what this is worth to someone. How do you think about pricing an app or having a freemium type of model, and also saying like there's a point that I am comfortable with as an entrepreneur to provide this service to someone with technology. And I'm not going to look at this as if it's like, a drug company where they say like, hey, what's the maximum amount I could get someone to pay for this pill that's going to solve X? So how do you think about that? Maybe share that, for our entrepreneurs here that look at like the price to value proposition. Obviously it's off the charts, but I just want to understand how you think about it.
Yeah, that's a important topic, I think, especially because Rooted is a social impact business. And when I was starting Rooted, social impact businesses weren't even taken seriously. There was like very few venture funds for social impact businesses, and it just wasn't considered like, profit and helping people. They just weren't considered like mutual. And so that has always been a challenge. I'd say that the reason why freemium resonates with me is because with over 66% of people who experience panic attacks don't actually look for the treatment they need, often due to barriers like stigma. A huge one, though, is also financial. So if you experience panic attacks, you might know that it can be so debilitating that understandably many folks aren't able to work. And so it was really always important for me to have that free component. And it did make me sort of butt heads with potential investors and with like judges of different competitions that Rooted was in, because they were under the impression that, you shouldn't have that much free content. On the flip side, however, that's really how we grew organically, right? People sharing it with their friends. There's no like hard paywall. You can go and you can get value from it. So it's kind of like the chicken and the egg with that. And then in terms of the actual price, that has a lot to do with what is out there for other health and wellness apps on the app stores and looking at that. And you're right. For some, we get testimonials from people saying that they're able to go back to work because of Rooted. So like, it is really hard to put a price on that. Right. But we just sort of go on what is sort of like the market standard for apps, not necessarily healing panic attacks, but just for an app.
Mm-hmm. So as you think about, I used to run a software company, and my partner, he was on the product side, and he was always selling the next version. And I felt like the app and the web platform that we built was always like a wet painting, and it always had more work to do. So as you think about going forward, do you go deeper into panic attacks? Do you kind of say, hey, if you have a panic attack, and now 25% of the market, or adults have anxiety, that I'm basically going to take on the anxiety side of it, because the foundation is basically like an ongoing, subtle earthquake at like 4.0 instead of like at 8.0. How do you think about building the business? Or do you say, look, I'm going to stay in my lane, and it's my lane, and I don't have to, I don't have to talk to investors about what I want to do. This is my company. I'm going to run it the way I want to do it. And that's the voice you listen to.
Yeah, I'd say out of definitely the stay in my lane part. I am trying to build a happy life alongside working on this. And yeah, I think in figuring out my values and learning more about myself over the past 5 years, I think that doing it this way has been beneficial and is how I'd like to continue.
Great. And from a standpoint of, build, work-life balance, or if that really exists, it's a nice cliche. But anyone building a business, it's top of mind all the time. And, I talk in my sleep. So my significant other would tell me like, hey, I think you were talking about business, in the middle of the night, based on what you were talking about, because you told me a story recently about this deal you're working on. So when you say like creating a happy life, like what does that mean to you? And what are some of the things or guardrails you would advise other entrepreneurs to take that maybe you learned over time, that weren't self-evident?
Sure. Yeah. I'd say one component is sort of managing my own time. So, like you said, for most entrepreneurs, your business is always top of mind. We don't really get weekends. That really wasn't a thing for me at all. My first few years of the business, I didn't take any days off at all. And I think that at the time there was like a desperation. I needed this product to exist. I needed to get it out there. I needed for people to see the value of it as well. And now that all of those goals have been met, I'm able to actually relax a bit more, right? It's no longer from this like place of desperation. It's more of like okay, how do we keep making it better? How do we keep getting the word out? But it's definitely not as intense and stressful as it was at the beginning. So that's been a huge part of it. Just managing my own time. I think it was like Morgan Housel, the guy who did The Psychology of Money, that book. He said that time will be more valuable of a commodity than money in the future. And I can see that personally for me. Like my time is precious. Like I really value it. So managing it is a huge part of happiness for me. And then, yeah, I think, financial security is important. And I think deciding like when enough is enough for you is a huge component too. I see, I'm, fortunate I'm able to interact with a ton of awesome entrepreneurs. I see some of them like extremely, extremely wealthy and still very unhappy. And so it's
Right.
like pretty cliche, but money doesn't buy happiness. It provides security. And I think understanding where your enough is a huge part of that. And so I guess rooted is more so based on like steady growth versus like growth at all costs. And that's another component for happiness.
Gotcha. When you take a look at marketing and doing any kind of like speaking engagements, or you're out there basically bringing more and more awareness to panic attacks, have you seen a cultural shift, related to, obviously everyone in the US is talking about mental health. It's okay to, talk about how stressful you are. It's okay to talk about how you feel. It's okay to say, I want to take some time off from playing tennis because I'm not in the right frame of mind, which, before used to be deemed a weakness. And now it's just basically, I'm human. So how has that kind of propelled you and given you confidence to have this as a lecture, or like, hey, we can talk about this. There's nothing, there's no faux pas about talking about panic attacks, where there might have been like something that was under the rug before.
Totally. Yeah, it has completely changed since I started Rooted. So I started Rooted in 2018, and panic attacks just weren't talked about. It's just not something
Mhm.
that you would want to even associate with yourself. I had trouble putting my own face on the brand. I also thought, it's not about me, it's about the app. But I remember, yeah, the first few articles that I participated in, they would ask for a headshot and I would send them the app mascot, Ron, because I just wasn't comfortable. And I didn't want to
Yeah.
just be known as the anxiety girl or the panic attack girl, because there's so much more to me and there's so much more I wanted to do with my career too. So, yeah, I'd say it's like night and day. And I think COVID was a huge part of that. I think a lot of people opened up to the fact that they were really struggling during COVID. And a
Mhm.
lot of large institutions and government organizations were just starting to talk about mental health. And, that does really play a part in destigmatizing. So I think it's, yeah, like night and day since when I first started. It's a lot more talked about now.
And one other question here, and maybe a couple of follow-up questions, but you started off just as a B2C app in the App Store, correct?
Yeah.
And you referenced that there's some B2B relationship here. Can you talk about, maybe on a no names basis, who's first in line to basically say, hey, I need to make sure that my employees or my members have access to this just in case? And then has this been a big push into corporate wellness programs where they say, hey, here's all the apps and here's all the services that we want to provide to our employees, and this is a mission critical part of that app suite? Or just talk about the B2B side, because everyone tries to sell into B2B on the corporate wellness side, and obviously it's a very long sales process typically, and there's a lot of groups out there, but there aren't as many groups that go as deep as you've gotten into a specific modality or specific circumstance, that I would think, yeah, this is mission critical. We should have this on here. So can you talk a little bit about the B2B side?
Totally. And I think, since you said there's entrepreneurs potentially in the audience, I'd say one important distinction is that I started off with B2C, and that traction allowed me to approach the B2B. Traditionally, you'd get venture funding, build out a team, a sales team, and then go after B2B. So that's like an important difference there. But yeah, when I first started the B2B component, it was from getting comments and testimonials from users saying, hey, I actually can't even work right now, or I can't afford this because I'm out of work, and could my employer, or I'm on leave, could my employer not pay for this? Could my government not pay for this? A lot of testimonials like that. And so that's sort of what it started that. And I started off with just working with other startups actually, who their goal would be to reduce turnover and increase performance of employees. And they were recognizing like, hey, we actually do have turnover from mental health issues. Let's see how this would work. So we did some pilots, and the pilots were positive. Ended up working with retail, to restaurant chains, and eventually, yeah, with therapists themselves. During COVID, there was like such long wait lists for therapy.
Mhm.
So those that really did want to help, they just offered these other tools that folks can rely on. Even when you have a therapist, like you can't necessarily call them in the middle of the night, right? So that's when Rooted is there. And yeah, it's meant to be a symbiotic tool, but it is, yeah, definitely recommended and used by those groups. So that's the B2B component.
Yeah. And then just one other question or comment on the B2B side. As people renew annual contracts for their corporate wellness initiatives, a lot of times they'll look and say, hey, what's the usage bit? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's like a fitness app, or if it's a data tracking app, or what have you, the numbers are usually very low, from an employer providing services to an employee that they actually, 20 or 30% of the employee base take advantage of. In your case, is it viewed more as like this is an emergency type of app, and therefore, even if it's 1%, like that's 1% versus zero, and that turns potentially into like a huge catastrophic issue. Have you had any conversations on the B2B side where they ask you how many people have used the app? And it might be low, but that low number is like almost irrelevant, because if it was only a couple of people, like those are important people, in that moment of time. That seems to me like a distinction to me that could benefit a recurring component of your business, or anyone that's in like this mission critical, care. Can you comment on that? Because I feel like some people may need to think about that when they answer a question on what's your usage.
Yeah, so I'd say it completely depends on how that business calculates the value of Rooted, right? So
Right.
if we look at Rooted being offered as one of many tools that a company might be offering to hopefully prevent turnover, that's a different type of calculation than when you look at, okay, every visit is costing us $27,000.
Wow.
If
Gotcha.
we're spending a couple $100 on Rooted and it prevents even just a couple annually, then that's already a win. So, it totally depends on how those businesses look at it. Yeah. I'm
Awesome.
happy to say we've had happy customers. So,
Yeah, it's great what you're doing. It's also great that you didn't think about, doing it in a traditional fashion of, putting together a business plan and, saying, hey, I hope there's a market and here's like the research, because I feel like the best ideas come from solving your own problems.
yeah.
And kudos to you for executing on that. And then the last thing is, you got any quotes that you live by, or any quotes for our quote library that you like to reference?
Ooh, I think this too shall pass.
This too shall pass. Very
This
good.
too shall pass. Very relevant for panic attacks, obviously, but
Sure, sure,
also
sure.
any life events. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for coming on. Please let us know how we can help you in any of the, whether it's business, if you've got relationships with groups like Gym Pass or Fit Reserve, or any of the corporate programs that are, fitness based, that are always trying to add more to their bailiwick of services. Happy to do that. And thanks for what you're doing for people. And
Awesome.
congrats
Yeah.
on 3 million.
Thank you.